Me and my lovely colleague Pam Denicolo, are you there, Pam? Are going to be talking about our virtual support and training for supervisors and kind of what we've learned in a really short period of time in adapting our supervisor training and what we think that means for the future. So I'm going to pass to Pam to introduce herself.
Hi, John, if you want to put the first slide on, because I want to illustrate a point with it. Thank you.
Sure.
We started off with this introduction about ourselves, and it's very formal and very CV looking because it illustrates the point that in March, when we were suddenly thrown into this world of virtual reality, as it were, in our training, we had gone from really enjoying running workshops which were well received, that were interactive, that were fun for everybody, including us. And we were challenged to try and do that on this different medium that we have now. And it was a bit scary to start with. And I think I started off being a Margaret Thatcher kind of person on screen, giving a talk, a presentation rather than actually a workshop. And gradually we decided we had to improve our presentation skills in this particular environment. And as Stephanie and Rebecca said earlier this morning, we suddenly found loads and loads of people all wanting to do supervisor workshop. So we had to sort of keep up our act, as it were, but in this different way. And so we started to look at our underpinnings. What were our philosophies about running workshops? What were our theoretical bases, so that we could then begin to translate them? Most of you will be familiar with these theoretical underpinnings, but I'll just quickly go through them to say this is what we started thinking about in order to change the nature of our rather the presentation of our workshops, but maintaining their essential nature. So we looked at Isabel's descriptions, and we knew that we had to take account of our participants' previous knowledge, which is quite difficult when you have 100 people perhaps on a screen, most of which you can't see. You can only see perhaps an icon. We had to make use of activities, which we've always done, but activities online or offline, but part of our workshop. We had to create a motivational environment to help them to learn, and we had to make use of advanced organizers, letting them know in advance what they might be engaged with, things to think about in advance, things to bring to the workshops. We had group work, games, analogies, examples, and illustrations that we wanted to join in with our workshops. And we wanted to remain being facilitators of a learning process rather than being lecturers about things. None of these are precluded by the medium that we're using. It's just that we need to use it more creatively. And can I say at this point, thank you, Tony, for using this medium fabulously to run this conference. So some further keys to transformational learning: understanding of andragogy, that people need to be self-directed rather than teacher-directed. Mesereau's transformative learning, we wanted to encourage them by using dilemmas and case studies to think critically about things and to question their assumptions, beliefs, and expectations. We wanted to draw on Baud and Lee's peer learning, communities of research practice, to build up within groups those communities so that they could help each other. And then more recently, Button's team science, that recognizes that all research really needs collaboration across as well as within disciplinary boundaries, and that people need to share their expertise across research context. And that relies on Mumford's notion of building trust through action learning sets. And this notion of building trust, and going back to our keynote speech right at the beginning of the day, trust is not easy to build up when you're online working with people who you don't know and perhaps can't even see. So I think that is one of the biggest dilemmas that we have in trying to translate our practice into a different medium of teaching and learning. So the key elements of our workshops, whether they are pre-webinar or the early face-to-face sessions, we want to establish current expertise, interests and learning needs of participants. So we're trying to, as we would in a workshop, ask people in advance to tell us about what they're interested in, what their experience is, and so on, so that we can, during the session, provide stimulating, appropriate resources that meet those diverse needs. We introduce activities that involve dilemma resolution so that we can encourage active learning, engagement with the process. We allow time for and encourage question and answers with built-in flexibility. And usually with our slides would have a big question mark every now and then, where we could deliberately look at the questions that are building up in the chat box. And we want to, in relation to something that Zia was saying in our breakout group, we want to ensure that people are not only comfortable, but have breaks for reflection on their practice. And we want to indicate to them means where they can get further information, but also the motivation to seek it out. And Dawn is now going to tell us a little bit about how those things have actually worked out in practice. Dawn.
Right. So that all sounds lovely when we're thinking about it and we're sat down and we're like, this is what we need to do. But when you're practicing it in the real world, it's quite scary. We have managed to establish really, really solid supervisor training at the University of Surrey and also for the Society for Research in Higher Education, which we do stuff for. And people love it and they come in and we get fantastic feedback and we get hundreds of supervisors on this training every year. So it's a bit scary than just totally upending it all and doing it in a different way. But we had the demand and we had to meet it and we couldn't let people down, particularly as people seem to really want it in this time. So we had this really fully subscribed program that needed to be converted to virtual. Our core training is 2 days worth of supervisor training aimed at relatively new supervisors who need support and who need this to be able to continue supervising at the University of Surrey. So we changed those 2 full days into 2.5-hour modules or sessions. But there were other things that we also looked at doing. We needed to prioritize the peer learning and those transformative exercises. We realized that is just the most important part. And we talked about community this morning. It is all about community and discussion and case study and experience sharing. So breakout rooms, virtual whiteboards, all these fabulous new things we have virtually are really, really key. Content and just information giving actually can be done in different ways. So we're looking at how we can bundle that type of stuff up and do it pre or post learning or in between sessions, which works actually quite nice. Once you make, you establish those groups and people have a responsibility to each other, they're more likely to do the work in between because they're relying on each other to be able to hold the discussions together. So that leads us nicely to lessons learned. We did deliver our initial supervisor training in 2 full days, broken up over 4 modules. We did these in 2-day things where we had morning and afternoon, but also across 4 days in 1 week. We also have been doing examiner training in 2-hour modules. And another thing that just started this year, and we only ran once face-to-face and then had to go straight to virtual, is mental health first aider training for our academics, which is a certified training, which has now been certified to be able to run virtually too. So we have a little bit of feedback from that. In general, 2 and 2.5 hour modules work well. Lots of people seem to think that it has to be much shorter, but actually you can do 2.5 hours as long as it's interactive. And yeah, that participation is key. Actually doing one module a day as opposed to 2 in one day works a lot better. Case studies take longer than you think, so make sure, and discussions take longer than you think, so give more time to those. We learned that. And the chat room is hugely dynamic. So you would have noticed this morning even, people chatting during the keynote had such a wealth of information coming through. So using that, I think, is a fantastic thing for people to do. So feedback was really, really good. In general, people want to keep with virtual. However, people miss the face-to-face. So I think there should be a hybrid approach in the future. However, having some virtual allows you to bring in more expertise, allows you to bring different groups together that you may not have been able to bring together, and is overall more inclusive. So thinking about how you can open those doors to supervisor training to people who perhaps didn't have the time or couldn't get to where you were doing, and mixing your groups, I think has a huge benefit in the future. So we should take this learning because it really can be done virtually, but it'd be nice to see everyone in person one day too.